Welcome to another video.
This is the Sony TC-20F stereo cassette deck from the late 70s, early 80s.
But Dad, why is there a FedEx plane in the background?
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. That's an interesting story. Let's take a look at this cassette deck a little bit first. This silver-faced cassette deck has all electronic transport controls, handles chrome and normal bias tape, and has Dolby B noise reduction. From the front, it looks like a standard cassette deck, but look a little closer and you'll notice the form factor is a little strange. It doesn't extend very deep at all. Compared to a normal tape deck, this thing is a lot
Like the 99-cent one.
Yeah, this is a lot smaller. It has these little holes on the top, which are for close stacking with the matched components. But don't let the size fool you. This thing is built like a tank. For example, take this cute little puppy.
That we got Saturday.
This tape deck weighs more than twice as much. Although the controls are plastic, they have a nice solid feel to them. And the front and top panels are made of one solid piece of metal that is pretty thick. And around back, you'll find something else unusual. The RCA cables are not detachable, but the power cord is. I bet this was done to make it easier for people to hook it up using wire colors versus inputs and outputs. So let's look at some of the unique features of this tape deck. One of them is this thing called ARC, which is these two knobs and this memory switch. And I think this is basically just a more complicated and more primitive version of an auto-reverse mode switch that allows you to rewind and play a portion of the tape once or forever by setting these switches appropriately. Another unusual option on this deck is the peak hold switch. Now, we've seen or shown this before in another video on a Techniques model. Here it is connected to the same signal at the same time. And peak hold on the Sony appears to sort of freeze it so you can more easily find the peaks in your audio signal. I think I actually like the way the Techniques handles this better. So back in the day, how the manufacturers implemented the VU meters was a differentiating factor. Although for me, I never really had any problems with distortion once I kind of learned how my tape deck worked. Another notable thing on the 70s deck that came and went like bell bottoms is the hole around the counter. Notice the right digit has a wider area around it. Most tape decks just use a standard rectangle. This was a trend for a minute. I don't know why. If you do, leave a comment. A final weird feature is this gigantic remote port, which is different than other Sony decks in the same catalog and appears to be wired directly to controls. It doesn't send a signal, so it's got so many pins we can actually control different functions. Here, I'll find the play button here. But let's get back to the jet. Look at that stylized F at the end of the model number. The F is for Falcon. Falcon is a type of jet manufactured by a French company, Dassault Aviation. And this TC-20F tape deck is actually part of a whole Falcon-themed Sony component system, which is named for this Falcon jet, seen here. See, they've got the Sony branded
Sony
jet.
buy a ton. And
they even made a promotional album with the jet's picture and tracks like Take Off Falcon. Now, we're in Memphis, which is the home of FedEx. And coincidentally, FedEx, what jet did they use when they first started? That's right. They started off with these small Dassault Falcons in 1973, and of course they eventually grew to bigger planes.
Like the DC-10 above.
Yeah, but yeah,
look,
I don't have a
DC-10. The DC-10's coming in and jumps it on the Falcon.
Yeah, so of course the big question is why? Why does the electronics company Sony start doing a weird cross promotion with jets? Well, the answer is in the late 70s they weren't just selling electronics; they were also selling jets. This Falcon system was some sort of weird cross promotional tie-in. They had all sorts of different turntables and tape deck options and different racks. And I think the design goal was miniaturization. After all,
a Japanese catalog for some reason.
Yeah. There's not a lot of information on this. They show it featured in dorm rooms and other, under shelves.
There's a cigar.
Yeah, and they have different special racks. So I think the whole goal is kind of like they came up with a personal stereo is to kind of make it convenient, out of sight, hence everything's like really small. There it is in a, I guess under a shelf or something. Another weird fact about this system, it was called the Falcon and named after that jet that Sony was leasing, but in the United States it was actually called the Avatar system. So same model numbers, but it was called the Avatar microcomponent system.
Okay, might be a little weird.
Not that Avatar, different Avatar. This was way before that.
By the way, we rode the Avatar ride in Disney World.
Yeah, that was kind of fun. Anyway, so let's look at repairing this thing. When I got this deck, it powered up but would not move the tape, so I figured, okay, it needs a belt or two. After you get the thick metal plate off, there was this handy diagram identifying all the printed circuit boards, and there were a ton of boards packed inside tightly. And I could tell from the fact that there were some screws missing and in the wrong place. Somebody else had been inside of here before me. They probably looked at all this and just said, okay, I'm going to pass. But I kind of pressed on. I took off the back cover and...
Like if you're going to find Bigfoot, you got to keep on going.
Yeah, I guess so. The play belt underneath this plate was just fine. The actual problem was up front. It was, not pulling the take-up reel. This thing was so tightly packed, it wasn't actually a lot of fun to work on. I kept dropping pieces into it, and you just had to really dig to get the stuff. But anyway, let's see.
It was so annoying.
Yeah. So behind this plate, you've got the little mechanism that controls the take-up reel. So it swings back and forth between the two reels, and a little tire moves it. And so what was happening is it wasn't turning the take-up reel, and the belt on the right there wasn't telling the deck that the counter was moving, so it would just stop immediately. First thought it was the belt, and then I thought it was the idler wheel, but neither one of those things were the problem. It turned out to be this clutch mechanism, which if anybody knows where to buy these or how to fix this, post a comment, because I'm not sure. There's the problem. As you can see, the outer part of the clutch turns, but the inner part doesn't. And eventually I got it to go on fast forward, but it wasn't powerful enough to really pull it on play, which was weird. So that kind of led me to the conclusion of the clutch. So I completely disassembled the clutch assembly. There's all the pieces. It has got a bunch of these.
We're going to have to buy a new one.
Well, I don't know where to buy these things. It's got.
What about on eBay?
Yeah, I guess I could look on eBay. It's got a bunch of...
Or Amazon.
If anybody knows how to refurbish these clutches or where to find them or whatever, let me know. Here's kind of the best I was able to get it to do, although it's a little slow, and it gets a decent amount of traction, but if I put any sort of pressure on the play reel, the clutch can't handle it, doesn't stay engaged. With fast forward, the clutch is moving faster, so it is enough pressure. About the best I could get it to do was to slightly pull the take-up reel during play, but it was too slow, so the tape ended up spilling up there. So eventually, after messing around with the clutch too much, it went out completely, and I had to just rig it with a piece of tape and permanently lock it into place. But once I got it where it would pull somewhat, I was able to compensate for the weak clutch by turning this potentiometer up top to increase the take-up reel tension. You can see here I've got it cranked way over to the left, which makes the motor go faster. If I go back to the normal position, which was straight up and down, the tape starts to get loose again. So I basically just sort of hacked around it for this video. There's probably a better way to fix this.
If anybody has a clutch that you're not using for your tape jacks, please give us a link and can you please send it?
So in conclusion, what's the deal with this tape deck? There really wasn't a lot of information about it. It disappeared shortly after introduction and was rarely advertised. It's rarely sighted in the wild, sort of like a Bigfoot. It's something you don't see very often. To me, it seems like more of a style and marketing experiment and doesn't really fit in with other decks in the Sony catalog of the time. It's electronic but not auto-reverse. It doesn't handle metal tapes.
And he's wearing headphones.
And it has a different remote port than a lot of the other Sonys. Feels like somebody's pet project in the middle of a huge company. That's about it. So now we'll leave you with an audio sample from the YouTube audio library. See you next time.
See you next time for another video.